Welcome to the Explainer. I want you to imagine something for a second. Picture a moment in the deep, deep past. We weren't the only ones out there. There was actually a time when at least 5 or 6 entirely different human species shared this planet at the exact same time. We're talking about completely distinct biological lineages, separated by hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. You had Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, Denisovians, Homo floresiensis, all walking the exact same landscapes, breathing the same air, and occasionally looking right across a valley at each other. But today, that crowded planet is totally gone. It's just us. And the question of exactly what happened to those other humans is honestly one of the most fascinating and emotionally charged mysteries in all of human evolution.
Okay, let's dive right into this, because this is the uncomfortable, really heavy question that kind of dominates how we think about this. Did our species, Homo sapiens, deliberately and systematically wipe out the other human species? Because if the answer is yes, if we literally committed a continent-wide genocide just to become the last one standing, well, that isn't just ancient history. That says something incredibly dark about our capacity for violence. It implies our entire survival is built on a foundation we'd probably rather not think about. So, to get to the actual evidence-based truth, we need to treat this whole thing like the ultimate cold case.
Section 1. The Neanderthal case. Victims or competitors?
Our very first suspect profile naturally has to be the Neanderthals. They dominated Europe and Western Asia for a staggering 400,000 years. And right off the bat, we have to completely ditch that old casual myth of the grunting primitive brute. The evidence is absolutely striking. Neanderthal brains were actually as large as ours, and in some cases even larger. They made these highly sophisticated Mousterian tools that required an intense amount of planning and skill to pull off. They cared for their sick and injured. We literally have Neanderthal skeletons that show healed trauma, meaning someone had to care for them for months just so they could survive. They buried their dead. They likely even created art. By any reasonable definition, these were people, living with deep, complex social structures. They absolutely were not simple creatures just waiting to be swept aside. Yet roughly 40,000 years ago, shortly after modern humans showed up in Europe in big numbers, the Neanderthals vanished. I mean, the timeline is incredibly suspicious, right? This is where the genocide hypothesis comes in, arguing that modern humans and Neanderthals met, fought, and we won in this long campaign of total war. But actually, hold on. Correlation is not causation. When we actually dig into the fossil record, there is zero smoking gun evidence of systematic, large-scale violence between the species. Sure, violence leaves some ambiguous marks on bones, but the massive lack of concentrated, widespread evidence means we really can't confidently convict our ancestors of an organized extermination.
Section 2. The DNA plot twist. Lovers, not just fighters.
Now, what's really interesting is this number, 1 to 4%. That is the amount of DNA in literally every non-African modern human alive today that comes straight from Neanderthals. This isn't some abstract ancient trace. This is functionally significant DNA sitting right inside your cells at this exact moment.
And this completely flips the narrative. Because think about it, pure total war simply cannot produce viable offspring. Groups that are locked in mutual extermination don't have kids together, who then survive, reproduce, and pass those genes down for thousands of years. What this genetic evidence actually proves is that our ancestors had deeply complicated interactions. Over thousands of years of sharing the same geography, contact was varied. Sometimes it was probably hostile, sure, but sometimes it was clearly peaceful. And it leaves us with these wild, unanswered questions about those mixed ancestry kids. Were they accepted into the tribes? Were they rejected? We don't know the social dynamics, but we do know they survived, because their legacy is quite literally pumping through our blood.
Section 3. The silent killers. Disease, climate, and competition.
So if it wasn't a clean, deliberate Hollywood-style genocide, we have to shift gears and look at far more devastating, invisible mechanisms. Let's compare these two ideas. Direct violence leaves really rare, highly debated marks on fossilized bones. But imported disease? That is a silent assassin. Think about the historical analogy of European contact with the Americas. Entire populations were wiped out by novel pathogens. When modern humans migrated out of Africa, they brought viruses and bacteria they'd been adapting to for millennia. Neanderthals, who had been completely isolated from those specific bugs, would have been insanely vulnerable. A modern human wouldn't even need to raise a spear to be lethal. Just coughing a novel respiratory infection could have triggered a catastrophic population wipeout. And the crazy part? That leaves absolutely zero trace in the fossil record.
So the crucial point here really comes down to this core ecological principle: competitive exclusion.
Simply put, if two different species occupy the exact same niche and need the exact same resources in the exact same area, they cannot stably coexist. Eventually, one is going to eliminate the other purely through attrition. Modern humans didn't need to hunt Neanderthals down. We just needed to be slightly better at hunting the same large game, and slightly better at using the same environments day after day for thousands of years.
Let's actually weigh the main suspects here. Direct violence? Like we said, ambiguous evidence. Disease? None left behind. But look at climate change and competition. We have ice core data proving that between 40,000 and 28,000 years ago, Europe went through some totally extreme climate instability. The Neanderthals were already incredibly stressed by their environment. Enter Homo sapiens, and we brought a massive competitive advantage. Highly sophisticated projectile weapons like spear throwers, which meant safer long-distance hunting. But maybe even more importantly, humans had vastly larger social and trade networks. If resources dried up in one valley, we could lean on neighbors. Neanderthals didn't really have that. So these already stressed Neanderthal populations were likely just pushed into increasingly marginal, terrible territories until they fragmented and faded away.
Section 4. The other victims, Denisovans and Homo floresiensis. Because you see, this cold case isn't just isolated to Europe. We see this same eerie pattern playing out all over the globe. And this brilliantly illustrates just how mysterious the ancient world was. Take the Denisovans in Asia. Physically, we have almost nothing. Literally just a finger bone and a tooth from a cave in Siberia. That's it. But genetically, they left a massive footprint across modern human populations in Asia and Oceania. The Denisovans are a true ghost species. We basically only know they existed because of the genetic traces they left inside us after mixing with our ancestors. And they actually left us something incredibly valuable. Some of those Denisovan gene variants that stuck around give modern humans highly specific survival advantages. For instance, there's a specific gene variant found in modern Tibetan populations that allows them to thrive in the super thin air of high altitudes. That variant? It comes straight from the Denisovans. So every time someone runs a marathon up in the high mountains of Tibet, they are quite literally running on Denisovan biology. How cool is that?
And we can't forget about Homo floresiensis, famously nicknamed the Hobbit humans because of their small size. They lived on the Indonesian island of Flores. They disappeared around 50,000 years ago, which again highly suspiciously correlates with the arrival of modern humans in that region. But we have to remember, island ecosystems are incredibly fragile. A small island population like that can be wiped out super fast by novel diseases, a sudden spike in competition for very limited food, or honestly, just terrible luck, like the massive volcanic eruptions we know happen on Flores. It just goes to show that the exact mechanism of extinction could wildly vary depending on where these species lived.
Section 5. The messy reality, assimilation and extinction.
So let's pull all these threads together and look at how this builds across the timeline. 400,000 years ago, Neanderthals are established and thriving. Fast forward, around 50,000 years ago, the hobbits vanish from Indonesia. 40,000 years ago, Neanderthals finally succumb to climate stress and outcompetition. And today, Homo sapiens stand entirely alone. When you look at it all at once, the evidence really doesn't point to a clean, intentional genocide. It was way more complicated. It was this slow, messy combination of invisible infections, gradual grinding out competition for resources, and slow genetic absorption over thousands and thousands of years. We absorbed deeply useful traits from these peoples in the very process of replacing them. Immune functions, metabolic tweaks, things that actually helped us survive. Now, the specific lived experience of a Neanderthal looking across a valley or a Denisovan surviving a brutal Siberian winter, those minds, those unique ways of being human, they are irretrievably lost to time. But they aren't totally gone. As this quote beautifully puts it, we carry a small piece of them in our DNA. It is the only monument they have.
So I want to leave you with this final, maybe somewhat uncomfortable thought. The world we live in right now, where being human means just one biological thing, is actually just a tiny surviving fraction of a much wilder, much more diverse history. We are the sole inheritors of this planet, literally carrying the genetic echoes of the cousins we outcompeted, infected, and absorbed. Are we actually equipped to carry the legacy of the humans we replaced? It definitely makes you wonder how they would view our genetic inheritance today. Science can give us the fascinating mechanics of how it all happened, but it leaves us to grapple entirely on our own with the true moral cost of our survival. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.